gentle learners. If I sound a bit nasally today, that's because it's hay fever season, and by the time I finish filming this video, I will probably have sneezed about 23 and a half times. Last video, I showed you how to make one of these beautiful clocks with your children. This is a lot of fun to make. If you didn't see that video, I will leave it in a card up here somewhere, and I will also link it in the description box below. In this video, I'm going to be using this DIY clock to help you learn how to teach your child how to tell the time. Now, when a child is learning how to tell the time, there are a few different things that they need to know, some pre-knowledge that we need to make sure is there before we start introducing learning how to tell the time from clocks. First of all, it's really important that children can recognise the numbers 1 to 12 because that's what's on our clock, that's what they're going to have to be able to recognise in order to read the clock. Second, but not as important, it would be good if children have some kind of knowledge of fractions before they start learning how to tell the time. This is especially important in places like Britain, where we use the phrases or the terms half past, quarter past and quarter to. If I was teaching this somewhere in America, for example, I may not need that as much because you're more likely to just say 3:30 rather than half past 3. And finally, it's very important for children to know their 5 times tables when they're learning how to tell the time from a clock. It may not seem that important now, but if you think about it, we need to be able to know 5, 10, 15 or quarter, 20, 25. We need to be able to know how many minutes there are. So when the big hand is pointing to the 1, we know that means 5 past. This is something that you can do with your child just to get them ready to learn how to tell the time. You can just introduce a clock and start doing the times tables all the way around. Okay, so if you think your child is ready to start learning how to tell the time, get out your handy clock that you made earlier, link in the description box below, and show them the different parts of a clock. So we have the entire clock face, we have the numbers 1 to 12 all the way around the edge, which help us to know what the time is, and we also have these 2 hands. It's very important that children know that their hands are not just arrows, because on many clocks they aren't actually arrows. So we have the big hand, which I have in green here. This one tells us the minutes. We also have the little hand, which I have in red here. This one tells us the hour. The next thing children need to know is that 12 always goes at the top of our clock. So if they're holding a clock, looking at a clock, they're not looking at it upside down, sideways, or just slightly off so that number 1 is at the top. Because if you think about it, that makes a lot more sense to a child, that number 1 would be at the top. But no, number 12 is at the top. And this is where we can start introducing some of that time language. So, o'clock, for example. 12. When the big hand points to the 12, that means o'clock all the time, no matter where the little hand is pointing. So if we have the little hand pointing to the 2, then a child should be able to know then that it is 2 o'clock. So when you first start looking at clocks and start to tell the time, it's good to just focus on o'clock first, because then you only have to focus on moving the little hand. So you can do this all the way around: 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and so on. You can then start doing it in random order so that it's not just children reciting numbers. So this is 5 o'clock, this is 10 o'clock. Once they've kind of mastered that, or at least seem to have mastered that, we can start moving on to the minute hand, which is where things get a little bit trickier. Ask your child to choose a number. I would recommend that they don't choose 12 because we're focusing on that being o'clock at the moment, so we don't really want the hour to be 12 right now. So I'm going to choose 3. So my little hand, or my hour hand, is always going to be pointing at the number 3. As much as my split pin will let it. So we'll start with the little hand pointing at the 3 and the big hand pointing at the 12. Because of the exercise we've just done with o'clock, the child should be able to recognise that this is 3 o'clock. Now, if we move the big hand to the 1, we need to start using our 5 times tables. So 1 times 5 is 5. So this is 5 past 3. So anything this side of the 12 is past, anything this side all the way down after the 6 is 2. So that's another piece of terminology that can get quite confusing. So we've got 5 past, 10 past, and then we reach 15 minutes past. This is where we get our quarter. Sometimes it can be useful, helpful to show your child your clock with some lines on it to show where the quarters are, so half and quarter, or you can even colour in your 3, 9 and 6 in different colours so that when the hand gets to them, your child realises that these are special numbers and we call them something different. Obviously not all clocks are going to have colours on their quarter past, half past and quarter to, but this is just something you can do with your child to get them used to this terminology and the idea that these numbers are special. And then we have half past. So this is where you can say that this is our halfway line. So half past, because the clock is now in half. It's pointing to the other half of our halfway line. If you made one of these clocks, you may have, I'm not sure if you can see that, have made your halfway lines at the back. So you can use those as reference if you want to be talking about that at the front. Then we move on to the 7, which is our 35 minutes past. Now, depending on where you are in the world, you may just want to stick with 35 minutes past or 25 minutes to, which is where this gets extremely confusing for young children. 25 minutes to, quarter to, 10 to, 5 to, and o'clock. We also need to recognise that once our big hand has gone all the way around the clock, that our little hand moves to the next hour. So once you've done your times all the way around the 3rd hour, so quarter past 3, half past 3, quarter to, once it gets to o'clock, we're not going to have 3 o'clock anymore because we've already had 3 o'clock. So we move on to 4 o'clock and continue with that as we just have. The great thing about making one of these clocks is that children can be involved making them. So when you have made this clock, they will have already been discussing with you what the numbers are, because they've also hopefully either had to write them or recognise them to put them in the right order. They will have already noticed that 12 is at the top, and they will know that we have these 2 hands that move separately to each other. Again, as much as your split pin will allow. And so those were just some tips for introducing your child to reading a clock to learn how to tell the time. If you liked this video and found it helpful, please give it a thumbs up, as that really helps out my channel. Don't forget that in the description box below you can see the video about how to make yourself one of these beautiful clocks. If you want to see more videos like this, please do hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you get a notification every time I post a new video, so you never miss a thing. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.
Oh, my nose is so itchy.